The miles will glide by when you ride and listen. KSFO in San Francisco.
I'm Steve Cushman, and I've been doing this thing for a long time with this organization. I'm glad everyone came. We all know why we're here, and we all know who we've come to see. And this guy's done it all. I'm not going to go through all the stuff he's done because he's going to tell you that. And he's a good friend of CHRS and a good friend of mine, and Terry McGovern.
My bubby. Steve Cushman, the Cushman. How you doing, guys? Thank you so much for being here. Gee, this is the best you could do, huh? Well, I'm flattered as hell and delighted. And so anyway, for those of you who just may have walked in off the street, my name is Terry McGovern. I was a disc jockey here in San Francisco for about 100 years, 150 years? And I had the time of my life. I had the best career of anybody I know. Not that I made a ton of money. The pay was great, but I just got to work with the best people at the best radio stations, and I consider myself incredibly lucky. And was able to quit while I was ahead. And this is here's what happened. I arrived here in 1969, and I got the 9 to noon show at KSFO. And then Sherwood pulled one of his flights of fancy and left, as he would do, and everybody figured he's going to come on back. But this time, management decided, no, let's just let him go out there, let him run the thing out, and somebody, who's the new, this is the new guy? Put him in. And that's kind of the way it was done. I drew the short straw. And that's where most of my hair went. That first year, maybe it was almost 2 years I lasted on the morning show. And then they decided, no, this is, see, here's what I learned from this experience. You may want to take this with you into your lives. Don't ever replace the guy. Replace the guy who replaced the guy. That's the trick. But I got very lucky because, believe it or not, it was a shock to everybody, including me, that when they brought Jim Lang up, of course, wonderful guy, terrific guy, and it was the right move to make. My numbers really were pretty good in the morning, so they kept me. Saved by the skin of my teeth, and I got the afternoon show. But this was what yeah. That was the artwork for my first appearance in town. And then here is the other great radio station I worked at. I hope that'll pop up. Yeah. Yay, KSAN. They're both great radio stations. I mean, like I say, I was just so lucky. And I got to tell you a story about this next picture. When I got to KSAN and got the morning show, things were going very well, and they decided to spend a few dollars. And they bought an ad that ran in local editions of national magazines. So this next ad actually got into the local version of Newsweek magazine. Now, my father was a madman. He was an advertising guy, a couple of martinis at lunch, packed the cigarettes every day. And he was a great writer, and he was really an advertising guy. He believed in advertising, and he worked for some great agencies. When he saw this in a national magazine, he called me and said, "Who in the name of God did this?" And I said, "I did, Dad." I don't know why, but we had a license to do anything we wanted to do at KSAN. And so I created this idiotic thing. This is my kitchen on Black Log Road in Kentfield. And pretty much says what it was like to work at KSAN. both stations were fun to work at, but KSN was like joining the circus. And it was really hard to leave. I had such a good time. Now, I just it helped for us to get to know each other. I'm showing you pictures, like, you come over to the house, let me show you some pictures. And they're random. There's one of the sweetest guys in the world. Ben Fong Torres and the wonderful Diane. I don't know which of my kids that is. I think it's Anthony. But in any event, Ben and Diane used to come down to LA and they would visit us when they came. And that's a picture. I just sent that to him and he said, oh my God, was I ever that young? Yes, we all were at one time. Let's see what else I've got for you here. I'm jumping around all over the place. This guy, Terry, you have to double click. There it is. Okay, that is a character that I got to do at Disney. In fact, I designed it, I helped design this character. His name is Launchpad McQuack, and he did, pardon me.
It's okay.
Stand by. He was a good living. He really was. So we did 2 shows down at Disney. One was DuckTales, and the other was Darkwing Duck. And I appeared on both of those shows, and it was one of the thrills of my life to literally be involved on the ground floor of designing a character for Disney. It was. You haven't done animation until you've worked for the big mouse. Now these 2 criminals are my beautiful sons. That's Anthony on the left, and that's Brendan on the right, and that's probably about 15 years ago, so they were in their 20s there, and they're the loves of my life. They're just fantastic kids. Dad, we're almost 40. Let me see if I could find a picture of them. Oh, here we go, yeah. And there they are today. Brendan is a police officer. He's a Sonoma County sheriff's deputy. And the midget in the middle is me. And the other fella is my other boy, Anthony, and he's a registered nurse. And they are fantastic people. I love them to death.
You did a good job.
I did a good job. Actually, I'll show you who did a good job.
Good job.
Is that up there? Yeah. That beautiful woman there is the woman that did the good job. That's my wife, Molly, who sadly passed away in 2017. And I miss her like crazy. She was really awesome. And her job, we decided we didn't want to have kids when we first got married. We were going to just, suck up the world and keep it all to ourselves. And then, after about 15 years or so, you remember that movie, My Cousin Vinny? My clock? I got that story. I said, hey, honey, my clock is moving. So we found a fantastic attorney, and we ended up adopting our 2 sons are adopted. I just wanted to explain that in case you were wondering why Brendan. I'm 5'7", he's 6'7".
How old were they when you adopted?
Thank you for asking. Brendan was an hour.
Wow.
An hour old. It was pre-done. It was a private adoption, and what you did, the attorney got everything together. He had young women coming to him saying, I don't want to abort. I want to go full term. Can you get me some parents? And most of the adoptions are kids, youngsters who get pregnant, and then you're not dealing with them. You're dealing with their sometimes 20-something mothers. And that's a tough deal sometimes. But both of our moms were 31 at the time, and they had multiple children, and they saw that we had been married for a significant amount of time, so they thought we were a good bet, and they were right. And we became,
And the other one? One was an hour, how about the other one?
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. You're really paying attention. The younger boy, I delivered.
Wow.
We're really getting into the personal stuff here. Hi, sweetie. Okay, so we went to meet Rick, the attorney called and said, how are things going with Brendan? Fantastic. Would you like another one? Yeah, okay, I think. Well, there's a beautiful woman here who wants to, put her child up for adoption. She's going to be delivering in a couple of months. And she picked you out of the file because you guys have been married for a while. Okay. So we went down to Long Beach to meet her. We lived in LA at the time. And we met her and her two screaming daughters. And I'm thinking, oh my God. Okay, yeah, sure, fine. And she looked at me and said, you have to be there. And I said, what? She said, you have to be there. I said, well, of course I'm going to be there. I mean, I tend to go the distance until they're in college and maybe beyond. She said, no, stupid, in the room. And so it was contingent on my agreeing to be in the delivery room. And I fought and screamed. I tried to get out of it. I did everything I could, and thank God I didn't, because it was one of the most beautiful experiences of my life. I delivered Anthony. He doesn't want to hear about that, but I did. Okay, now when I was in LA, I had a wonderful career down there. I did a lot of stuff, but the best part of it was becoming pals with this guy. In '85, the year that Brendan was born, I got hired to be on a show called Charlie and Company. And Charlie and Company starred two of the most fantastic talents in show business, Flip Wilson and Gladys Knight. And the Pips. The Pips were always on the set, because when we weren't rehearsing, they were rehearsing their club act, you know. And he was really just a genius. And for some reason or other, it was a fairly big cast. I'll show you the cast. And he decided I would be his pal, because he was very closed up, but very strange guy, but he was wonderful. And I became his pal, and every day I went to lunch with him. And that was quite an experience. This is the cast of Charlie and Company, the men. Now here's something interesting about television, the sitcoms. This show, Charlie and Company, was set half in Flip's home, Flip and Gladys's home, and the other half was at the Department of Water and Power or something in Chicago, and we were the guys that worked with him. And the show lasted for a year, and this many people saw it. And the reason this many people saw it was because we were on CBS, and at the same time, 9 o'clock on Wednesday night, guess what ABC was running? Dynasty. So we were like put to bed. And then so they decided to give the show a second year, and they fired us. They fired all the guys, and it became part of this strange phenomenon in television. If you do a sitcom, you can't do it in two different locations. Barney Miller, remember Barney Miller? That was originally at home and in the precinct. The home thing didn't work, and we were sort of flying in the face of that, but we were succumbed to it as well. So all of us got our walking papers, and that's me with hair, and Eddie Velez, and Richie Caron, and my roommate Ray Girardin, Kip King, and one of the most talented human beings in the world. And the reason Flip came back to television was because Cosby was hot. He had come up with the Cosby Show, and it just ate Flip up. He said, damn, he said, look at that brother. I can do that. And so that's why he came back to television. But his stipulation was, I'm not doing Geraldine. You remember Geraldine? Yeah. He would get in drag and play Geraldine, this woman who talked like this here, and was hysterical. I mean, he was in the early 70s the king of television, and largely because he did that character. But he refused to ever do it in this show. He wanted to be a guy, you know, like a real man, as Cosby was. And he gave it his best shot, but we only lasted 2 seasons. Okay, let me see. Anything else here? I want to tell you about how I got started in radio, since that might be of interest to you, because this is the Radio Museum. This is me at about 19 or 20.
Wow.
Why is it that I look like I'm 45? I don't. It's like when you look at the pictures of the 49ers back in the 50s, those guys all look like retired men.
Yeah, right.
I had the same thing going for me. Those 2 beautiful young women. It was a musical review, and musical reviews were very popular. And we had one in Pittsburgh, and a great little supper club or dinner club theater. And it was all song and dance, jokes, blackouts, kind of like a laugh-in show. And that was called Look Who's Talking. The girl on top, Marcia Edelstein. The girl in the middle, Iris Ratner. Not pictured is the 4th member of our company, Jeff Hohenstein. Are you getting a theme here? Terry McGovern. And it was during this experience that I became not fluent, but pretty damn good with Yiddish. So are there any Jewish people here? Sure. Yes? Yeah. Okay, I just want, because if you're Jewish back east, speaking Yiddish and all that, it's commonplace. But the West Coast Jews don't. They don't get into that all that much. So this is your test now to see if you really are a Jewish person. Okay? What do you call a Gentile woman?
A Goyisha.
No, that's a group.
Oh.
What's a Gentile girl? A shiksa.
A Texas.
Okay, what's a Gentile boy? Anybody? No. A shagets. Sorry.
I failed.
He's West Coast.
Yeah, West Coast.
That's right, West Coast.
It's only the Yiddish I knew from Grandpa.
Well, the grandpa, the family, the whole mishpucha.
The whole
The whole mishpucha. You know that one.
And the
Okay.
Grandpa was the one that said, we'll watch Ed Solomon Sunday night. And Grandpa also claimed all the baseball players, like Jakey Rabinowitz.
All this, and I didn't even mention my mom. I'm so sorry. I got to give her credit here. This is me in a commercial that I did, and I just wanted you to see what a really attractive woman I am. Isn't that insane? It was for a company called Copart, and they were the commercials were on the net on the internet. It was a company that took cars, cars that were demolished or in accidents, and they trashed them and turned them into scrap metal or something. It was not a very romantic job, but we made wonderful commercials for them, and they were very happy with it.
So Terry, it was a commercial. Can you give us a little bit of her? What did she sound like?
Oh, well, it was very lovely home you have here. May I use your bathroom?
Robert Williams either.
Great dial. Okay, I think I'm done with the pictures. Thank God. But I wanted you to. Oh, well, this is one of the most important pictures of my life, really, because it's a picture of me and a man who you loved, I'm sure, as much as I did. Now, let's see if I can make it come up.
Yeah.
That's from Doubtfire. And if you've seen Mrs. Doubtfire and you... I'm in the beginning. Most of you are out getting popcorn because my scene is with, when the credits are rolling. But I play the ADR director, which is the looping director. And this was one of the most fantastic days of my life, not only because I was with my friend, and he was a friend. I mean, we weren't like buddies, we didn't hang out on weekends or anything. But if you worked with Robin, and I did a lot of improvisation with him in San Francisco and down in LA. We belonged to these improv groups. He was just the most wonderful human being I have ever met in my life. And there's no qualification there. I'm not going to say accept this or only when he was angry. I never saw him angry. I never saw him anything but pleasant and interested in you. If you were talking to Robin, you couldn't find anything out about him because he wanted to know about you. And I remember when my wife was sick a couple of years, and I was over at the Throckmorton, where the theater in Mill Valley where we all improvised, and he came up to me out in the alley, and he walked up and says, "How's your wife?" I thought, how in the world does he know this? You know, but he was so concerned, and I miss him. I miss him like he's a member of my family.
We all do.
Yes, I know. We do. Let's hear it for him. And absolutely, manifestly insane. He really was. But what a sweetheart. Okay, I think that's all of those. Oh, no, wait. I want to now we're getting into my radio career. And who do we have here?
Alex Bennett.
Alex Bennett. Radio Wars. I don't know what that magazine is. Image Magazine. And that's me and Bennett. His real first name is Bennett. I forget what his last name is.
Bennett Schwartzman.
Schwartzman, yeah. Schwartzman. And I just, the other night up in Petaluma, I was out having dinner, and this guy came up to me and said, "I'm so-and-so." I said, "Yeah, okay." He said, "I'm Alex Bennett's producer." I said, "Oh my God, is he still alive?" He said, "Yeah, I'm producing his podcast now." He's in New York. I haven't listened to it, but there we are. He was on K-Hits, and I was on K101. And it was a great little article that promoted both of us. But here's this, talk about sweet guys, wonderful guys. That's me and Rick Kelleher. You know him as Don Blue. But he came in, I was doing the morning show. Again, I was doing the morning show and ended up going to afternoons because they brought Don in, and that was one of our promotions. That's what you do. Well, in those days, radio was fun. We did crazy, idiotic things to promote the stations. We had the contests on the air, and we gave things away, and we sent people to Hawaii, and did all sort of really marvelous things. It was fun to be a part of that whole era.
And so I have to ask you, what were you wearing behind the sun?
Are you an Aries? I'm sure there was something because, God help us, I hope there was. No, we had shorts on. We had our bathing suits on or something like that. But I want to get around to this thing because we're in this wonderful facility that honors an appliance that nobody owns anymore. Yeah. How many of you actually own a radio? Okay, I mean, in your house, and let's say, I'm going to start eliminating, not part of your stereo system, not a stereo receiver, an actual separate standalone radio. Really, see?
Both. Well, this isn't a typical room though, right?
No, this isn't a typical room, but I'm talking about your homes.
Well, yeah, but typical audience. We're all radio nerds
Of course,
here.
of course. Excellent point. But I am just so appalled at what has happened to radio. And because it was, I mean, I really, it was my life. My father was, got out of World War II with most of the rest of his buddies, and decided he wanted to get a college education and get a degree, and so he applied and got admitted to Tulsa University in Oklahoma because they had a really excellent journalism department, and my dad wanted to be a broadcaster. He went to that school for 3.5 years, got his Bachelor of Arts degree, and it cost him the GI Bill. There is a GI Bill still in existence, but you pay. You pay every dime back. It's like a student loan. When World War II ended, all these young men and women came home who wanted to go to college, carte blanche. And so we lived on the campus of Tulsa University in government housing, and they were barracks. We literally all lived in barracks. And my father, one of his courses was radio, and they had a wonderful FM radio station on campus. And so I remember walking across this athletic field to the radio station with my dad, and just a little guy, and he takes me into the station and goes about whatever he's doing, and I get to just roam around and look at the microphones and the dials and all these wonderful appliances, and then watch my dad through a double glass pane of window talking into a microphone. And I said, as any kid would do, looking at his father enjoying himself, hey, I wanted to do that too. And that's where the idea was born. And it was some years later, I was in high school, and I still had the bug. I still wanted to do it. And I sent a tape, a little reel-to-reel tape, to a guy who ran the NBC station in Pittsburgh. Gee, what was his name? I know, I'll think of it in a minute. He later wrote for Billboard magazine, Gil Fagan. And he was the program director at this big radio station in Pittsburgh, WJAS. And I sent him a tape, and it's amazing how much nerve you have when you're young. I mean, just gall, So I sent it to him, and I got the nicest thing. I actually got a letter back from him. And I'll never forget the first sentence. Terry, you're not quite ready. And then, of course, I don't know where that tape is now, but years later I did listen to it, and my voice was kind of like this. So I couldn't understand why he didn't give me the morning show right away. But from that letter, look, here's what you want to do. You want to go find a small market, radio station in a small market, send your tapes there, and that's what I did. And I somehow, miraculously, I've had probably the best luck of any guy I know. I mean, my career was just lots of luck. So I apply at this radio station, WKPA in New Kensington, the aluminum capital of the world, about 40 miles east of Pittsburgh. And I drove up there, and I went to work as I was writing copy for them or something. I was doing promotion work. And every time I'd walk by the studio, I'd look in like, why isn't that me in there? And so the program director pulled me aside one day, and his name was Phil Brooks. That was his air name. His real name was Phil Newman. And his brother was Al Newman, who was the program director of KSFO. And so here's how I was hired. Terry said, he had a beautiful, big, pear-shaped voice. Terry, sit down. I said, yeah, what's up, Phil? I thought for sure I'm getting my ticket. I'm out of here. Well, I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel. Those were his words. Oh, but I'm going to give you an air shift. What? And what it was it was not exactly A time. It was Sunday mornings, where all I got to do was play tapes and big transcriptions and the Lutheran hour and all that kind of stuff. And but it got me started. That was my first job, actually being on the radio, where people were listening. Not many, but there were people listening. Fortunately, I think no one this one particular Sunday morning. I go in. I'm already getting correspondence from Phil's brother. I've got tapes of Sherwood doing the Man on the Street stuff, if you remember that. Oh, Mother of God. And I would listen to it. I would laugh so hard I would weep. How could you possibly do something like this on the radio? This is And I said, well, I understand why he's the king of San Francisco. And so I was listening to it one morning while I was playing the Lutheran hour or whatever, and I had the monitors turned down, and I was listening to Don Baby on the inside speakers. And I said, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee, because it was a half-an-hour show that was on. It was on transcription. By that, I keep making this gesture, but it was this big disc. It wasn't tape. In fact, it was a turntable that started inside and played out. For you radio junkies, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, we have them right here. So I dash downstairs and go 2 blocks down the street where a young woman was working at the coffee shop. And I was sort of flirting with her. And I went in, got coffee and donuts, and hung out and was chatting way too long. And I make the trip back up to the radio station, let myself in. It was above an appliance store. And up I go. And as I get to the top of the stairs, I hear something, and it was like my life had come to an end. Because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was listening to the Lutheran Hour, and this must have happened moments after I left. The needle got stuck. And what I walked into as I opened the door was this: Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And I said, Jesus Christ. And took it off there, and no phone calls. So I don't think it was a real listened to show. But because of my knowledge of Al Newman and the possibility, somehow it became something tangible to me. This radio station, KSFO, it became all I could think about. And I was doing the little musical comedy show, and one night, a bunch of guys came from KDKA, the first radio station in the world. No arguments? All right. I was fully expecting somebody to say, no, KCBS. No. It was KDKA. They were part of the Westinghouse Brake Company, and the engineers who worked there were hobbyists with the little crystal sets. So they literally built a transmitter and decided to start broadcasting, and there was the Harding-Cox election in the 20s. That was the first commercial broadcast by an AM radio transmitter, in case anybody asks you. And the program director came in. It was a huge station, 50,000 watts, just big monster station. Everybody had their radios welded to KDKA. And he came to see me in this show, and I was kind of funny and very crazy, and he was looking for an all-night man. And normally it would be, go through the tapes. People are going to be applying from all over the country, guys with years of experience. But he was an odd man. He was really a sweetheart, and he, for some reason or other, thought, because we talked after the show, he said, "Are you on radio?" I said, "Yeah, well, I do a little Sunday thing. Maybe you've heard my show, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ." I didn't tell him that. But he said, "Why don't you come in and audition for us?" He said, "Is this us? You got a mouse in your pocket? What are you talking about?" Yeah, an audition at KDKA. And I went in, and it was 8 or 9 o'clock at night. I went into this gigantic studio, carpeted. It was gorgeous, And I started talking into the microphone, doing my audition. And I had a nasty habit in those days. I smoked cigarettes. And I didn't have a match, so I walked out of the studio, across the hall, and the program director, this guy, Tony Graham, what a sweet man. He's in his office listening to me. And I walked in, and I realized, because I said, "You're listening to me live?" He said, "Yeah, turn it off. Let's go get some dinner." Oh, God. And he took me out and hired me. And that's how I got started, KDKA in Pittsburgh. And that's what I was doing. Actually, I had gotten to daytime by the time Al Newman and I finally became acquainted. I used to call him regularly. I drove him insane. "Al, it's Terry." Yes, what do you want?" "Anything going on?" "No, Terry, we're fully staffed. Everything's fine. Tell my brother I said hi." I even called him one day. I was in basic training. I called him from the firing line. Everybody was shooting their rifles and shit. He said, "What the hell's that noise?" I said, "Automatic weapon fire, Al. You got to get me out of here." So finally, two things happened. the beautiful, wonderful Carter B. Smith decided that he would leave radio and become a stockbroker. And he was, he was a daytime star on KSFO. But that was his plan. And then Dan Sorkin, to me, if I really had to line up every disc jockey, radio personality I've ever heard in my life, he was probably the sharpest, funniest, most inventive guy I've ever heard. Interestingly, we never got along, but I will still say to this day, he was top notch. Dan Sorkin was in a motorcycle accident and had his leg amputated. Does anybody remember this? Yes. Yeah. So suddenly there's 2 openings. And Al calls me and says, why don't you come out and talk to us? And I had already been invited by a guy who was running KMPC, one of the stations in LA. He had been a general manager in Cleveland. He used to hear me on KDKA. And now he's out in LA, and he says, why don't you come on out here? So he sent me a first-class ticket. And what I did, I split that ticket. Pardon me. I split that ticket, went to see him in LA, but dogleg up to San Francisco, and Al Newman took me to dinner at the Trident. Do you know what it's like to be from the south side of Pittsburgh, and suddenly you're being wined and dined in San Francisco, in Sausalito? And he sat me down and he said, well, look, we've listened to your tapes and we think you got some talent. So do you want to come out and do the all-night show? And here's where nerve and youth. I said, no, I've already done the night show. I don't want to do the all-night show. And then I went, oh my God, what am I doing? And he says, oh, okay. So that was the end of the dinner. He had put me up in the Fairmont Hotel up in the tower. Jesus Christ. I'm calling my wife. You're not going to believe this. I get on the plane the next day. We fly home. By the time I get home, he called and said, okay, you got middays. He gave me Carter's slot, 9 to noon. So we fly out here. I mean, talk about high. I was so high. And we get to the Fairmont Hotel. We get to San Francisco. We found a place in Sausalito to live. And it was time to go on the air. And guess who I followed? I was on at 9 in the morning. Yeah. Donnie Baby. Hi, everybody, this is Don Sherwood. And my knees were weak. And I went to the bathroom. And we only had that one little studio at KSFO. And Don was in there doing his magic and being crazy. And I'm in the bathroom, getting ready to go on the air. And the speaker's in there. And he says, well, stay tuned for Jerry McGovern. Or whatever his name is. And he had come into the bathroom before signing off. And I said, hi. And I tried to introduce myself to him while he was, relieving himself. So he said, on the air, he said, yeah, I just met him in the bathroom. He's really an interesting young man. Haven't met anybody like that since the Fleet was in. And all those typical Sherwood lines. I almost wet my pants. He leaves the studio. I go in and sit in his chair, still warm from his presence, and opened the microphone and started talking to the most wonderful audience in the world, really, the San Francisco Bay Area market. 9 counties, and I did 5 years there. Sounds like a prison. I did 5 years.
When? Date?
69 through 74. And what happened was, I'm sorry if we're getting too detailed here, but Sherwood was always leaving. Yeah. He was crazy. He was insane. And he would leave and go to Mulahey or someplace, disappear for a couple of weeks. And you all were probably part of this. You kept listening, even though he wasn't there. He would take off for a week, a month. His ratings never dipped because people didn't want to miss him coming back. That's the kind of power he had. And So he left this one time, and the management kind of got ticked off at him and said, well, that's it. Let's put somebody else in there. And I drew the short straw. And then about 4 years later, 4.5 years later, I got the morning show at KSAN, and I really wanted to get out from under KSFO at that point because Don came back and he was sober. And I say this with all the respect in the world, as genius as he was, as absolutely drop down hysterically funny he was in the morning, a lot of it was because he was hungover or still drunk. And I say this with respect because I love the guy. And he sobered up. And he got on the radio, and it was deadly. It was just deadly. He would talk about AA and how he was allergic to alcohol, and the numbers started to do this. So I got an opportunity to go to KSAN and do mornings there, and that's what I did. And I got to work for another icon, Tom Donahue. Remember Tom? Big Tom? 300 pounds of fun. Probably more than 300. I'm still very close to his wife, Rachel, who lives down in Mexico. And we talk on the phone all the time. But so that's the radio career. That's what happened. I continued to, I was at KSAN, and in 1977, I went home and said, you know what, my dear, I want to be an actor, and I am an actor, and I got to commit to it. So we packed up the car, no questions asked. She was great at it. She just said, let's go. And down to Los Angeles we went. We got a house down there when things were still affordable. And I spent close to 15 years down there doing a little bit of radio, KRLA for a year, if you're familiar with the LA market. It was an oldies station. And I did commercials, I did animation, I did sitcoms, episodic TV, and a couple of movies. And so I got to do it. I actually got to do it. And then, why did we come back? Oh, yes, of course. Bobby Cole called me. This is 88. And he calls me and he says, he had worked at KSAN. And he said, and now he's the program director of K101, and he said, Don Rose has had a heart attack. Do you want to take over his show? And in LA at the time, there were probably 4 or 5 strikes going on. Directors Guild, Writers Guild, the actors, everybody was on strike. And it was terrible. It was just killing us all. So this was a godsend. And I said, yes. Got in the car, drove up, and went on the air to replace Don. It was kind of an on-air audition. And the first thing I said was, hi, my name is Terry McGovern. I used to be on the air here, and I'm back, and I just want to say I'm sitting in the same seat as Don Rose, and Don's health is not that... Bells go off, lights. They come in, grab me, pull me out. Shut up! I said, what? What did I say? Don't mention his name. He said, what? Yeah, no, you don't mention his name. He's done. He's not here anymore. And I thought, this has got to be the coldest thing I have ever heard in my life. This guy was a legend. When I was at KSAN, I was competing with him. I did okay with a certain audience, 18 to 34, the hippies. But he was killing. He was absolutely killing. And I tell this story because I just want you to get a little glimpse of what things are like inside this business. Radio was a really cold, heartless, mean place to exist, and very, very competitive, and lots of envy and lots of jealousy. And they didn't want me to say the man's name. I said, but he's a legend, and now he's sick. He can't work here. I'm just referring to him. Oh, I'll never mention his name again. Anyway, I stayed at K101, had a fairly good time there. And then I went over to KYA when KYA was FM. Gene Nelson was doing KSFO in the mornings. I was in the next room doing KYA in the morning. And that was a good experience, too. And that was my last gig. Thank you very much. Good night. But I just, you know, I keep saying that I was so lucky, but I was. And now here I am standing in front of you. I am now 40 years old. What? I am 82, turned 82. In fact, I'll be 83 in May. And I think back of my very long life and how lucky I was and how happy I am to now be back in the Bay Area. I'm living up in the greatest town I've ever been in my life, Petaluma. And I say that with, my qualification is, of course, Alameda's number 2. Because my friend Katya is back there. She loves her Alameda. And I've got 2 boys. My wife sadly passed away. And that was a heartbreaker, but I'm happy and content. And I work a little bit of public radio up there. I teach an acting class. And are there any questions? Anybody got a question?
Yeah, I hear your voice. For a while I worked at Alcatraz. I'd hear you making the announcement.
Oh yeah, I'm on the ship. I'm the guy.
Yeah,
don't
right.
Get too close to the
Alcatraz landing. Yeah, but I hear your voice a lot, and over the years I've had a lot of people tell me. Over the years, I've heard people.
So, to emphasize the point.
Right.
I have a good voice.
People have said, people tell me I have a great voice. I think I'm going to do commercials or whatever, not knowing what an incredibly competitive industry it is. When you teach your class at college, Marin, or when you talk to young people who are interested in voice work, how do you tell them to get work?
Well, I'm hard-pressed to be able to do that because in my day, I did what Gil Fagan, that guy long ago, wrote me and said to do, go to a small station and get your chops. But you can't do it anymore because the stations are gone. There was a wonderful station up in Petaluma, actually in Santa Rosa, and I think I'm going to start doing some tracks there on the weekend. It's called The Crush. And The Crush sounds a lot like K-San, so I may do some work there. But to answer your question, I don't know what I would say to somebody who wants to be on the radio now. First of all, it would be kind of odd to find a young person who wants to be on the radio.
I'm talking
People don't
voice,
know what radio
voice
was.
work, though, commercials.
Oh, well, that's something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want you in that either.
Yeah.
It's competitive enough.
Yeah.
Voiceover work is extremely competitive, and what's happened is that with deregulation, and I'm going to lay this one on Reagan, when he deregulated the guys in the tower, the guys that land the planes, remember that?
Yeah.
I think when he said, when he broke their union, this is a guy who was the president of the Screen Actors Guild in the 50s. This putz. His daughter was in my acting class, and she was a trip, Patty Davis. She said, if he runs again, But, you know, anyway, that's what he did, and suddenly unions became not so popular. And it has gotten to the point now where most commercials that are made are non-union. The big stuff that you hear on radio and television, you know, the big network commercials, they're still union. You're still getting a good scale and residuals. But most of it's just one time, you get a couple $100, and that's it. So it's not the lucrative field that it used to be. It just isn't. And but people want to do it, by all means, do it. Take my class. I'll teach you how to do it, and I'll let you know through here when I'm going to be teaching in Petaluma if you want to travel that far. But I have a good class, you know, a good setup. I've been teaching it for years, and I'll give you all the stuff that you need to know. And then if you want to do it, by all means do it. I would never dissuade anybody from doing what's in their heart, because I had the good fortune of wanting to do something when I was 11. And you ever read The Outlier by Gladwell? What's his name? I can't remember his name. Right? Gladwell. Malcolm Gladwell, thank you. And he said, he points out the success for people who knew when they were young exactly what they wanted to do. and he talks about the Beatles and Bill Gates and Terry McGovern. But I did. I knew what I wanted to do, and that was a tremendous leg up for me. That really helped me. And the fact that my dad was a beautiful voice and had worked in the business, I knew it before I had to learn it. I knew a lot about it. So I was, and plus I have a gift of gab, and that helps. You know, if you're a born talker, believe me, I'm a born talker, then that's a great help too. Although it's not really required. Some of the, take acting for example, some of the most talented and successful actors are incredible introverts. Have you ever heard Robert De Niro in an interview? No. He can barely speak. I mean, he's and then he becomes somebody and it's magic. So there's no way to predict who's going to be successful at it or who isn't. The only thing that really counts is doing it and applying yourself to it and sticking with it. And if lightning strikes, that's all it takes. You know, you just happen to be at the right place at the right time. Tell your story.
My story?
Yeah, about what you're doing.
Yes, I'd love to. I'd really love to. Well, first, Terry told me when I took his class, commercial class, in the hallway, first you said, "Don't quit your day job, Paul." And say, I've hence retired, but I created a tribute station to K101 because I was on K101 as a board engineer. I love voices, I love personalities, so I'm streaming K101 Live 365. I do Shotgun Tom Kelly, who's a very good friend of mine. He's doing all my top of the hour IDs. Don Blue is doing the 80s at 8. Charlie Serapin's doing the 90s at 9.
I sent you some stuff, didn't I?
And Terry has sent something. Celeste Perry's doing Love Songs After Dark. And Terry, you said, "Oh, the studio smells like gardenias. Celeste Perry's been here." And then
she's one of my true loves.
She's so great. Her. And James Gabbard I'm playing his Anything Goes program on Sunday
James is
nights.
on it.
Yeah, so
that used to be his radio station.
I'm repeating his, and it is his station. I'm repeating his Anything Goes programs from the 70s. And so you did something. Wow, this house, it looks like The Shining. It must be James Gabbard's house. Well, so he's
This is me?
Yes, this was you. And
I smoke a lot of cannabis.
And for Don Blue, you said, "Oh, I caddy for Don Blue." And, "Oh, he's got such a great cape." So Terry has lended his voice to my radio station. And many of the Bay
Say your
Area
name, would you
personalities.
please?
Huh?
Your name.
Oh, my name. Oh, I'm Paul Patterson. Yeah.
And you are an ambitious, wonderfully talented, and successful guy. You actually made it work.
Yeah, I'm having fun.
Now, how can we hear it? It's online.
Yeah, so you just go, if you put into Google search engine, K101live365.com, up comes the K101 player. It's a picture of the 700 Montgomery studio in the backdrop and the K101 logo. So, and you can listen to it, yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
You deserve a round of applause yourself. I'm going to get out of here, but I want to do something. We're talking about radio today and how it was back then when I was a kid. One of the things that radio had, today they call it imaging. Companies create an image for their whatever they're selling, whatever the company does. And when I got into radio, if it was a really good radio station and they had some money behind them, they had a great jingle package. But never in my life, get off the stage. Never in my life have I ever heard the jingle package that KSFO had when I got here. And for those of you who remember it, I don't think you'll mind hearing it again, but I want to play a couple of those jingles just to feel good again. This first one I want to play for you.
I think you're on.
Make sure the TV. Well, this is going to be sound.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll play this one first. But how many radio stations had Mel Torme?
Oh, yeah.
And listen to this, because when I was a young guy, I wanted to live in San Francisco. I saw Bullet 12 times. And The Graduate, because that was Shining. And I said, this is it, I've got to live here, I've got to live here. And this was the first jingle I heard when I got here. Go ahead.
Well, about your time in LA, and I saw a hysterically funny appearance by you where you played a clown on an episode of My Sister Sam. I don't know if you remember that gig, but
Not happily.
yeah.
No, let me explain.
Really?
Let me explain. I show up for that show. It was out at the Columbia Ranch out in Burbank. And I get there early, and need a cup of coffee, and I'm walking around. It's really early in the morning, very foggy, cold. And I see a young woman, and I said, hi, you know where I can get a cup of coffee? She said, oh, hi. She introduced herself. It was her sister. So let's listen to Mel.
Yeah, happier thing.
I have no idea what's going on. Can you turn it up?
Yep.
Just for you, KSFO in San Francisco.
It'll make you feel good. Listen to this one.
Like a strand of pearls strung across the bay, all the way from Oakland to the San Francisco shore. The lights on the bridge, inviting and warm, shine on in the clearest night or through the raging storm. On the Golden Gate, Richmond, San Rafael, San Mateo, Carquinez, Benicia, Martinez. Which you use wherever you go. The miles will glide by when you ride and listen. KSFO in San Francisco.
I'd like to close with a short thing, okay? You got a couple more minutes? Sure. All right. I am an old guy who's done a lot of stuff, and I have a lot of stories. And my friend, Katya, my dear friend, said, you have a lot of stories. Why don't you stop telling? No, she said, why don't you write them? Write them down. Oh, I know. But anyway, she prevailed, and I owe her a debt of gratitude, and you're going to still be my editor, so hang in there for me. Okay, so this is one of my short stories from a book. Katya, I forgot the name of the book. Happened to be this morning, I was walking my son Anthony's dog. Anthony has found a girl, so now Grandpa has got a dog. And I was out walking, and I said, oh my God, that's perfect. Because trying to come up with a title for something, it's really, really hard. Everything sounds so mundane and corny. And I thought of this title. I said, this is it. And then I went, no, wait a minute. I'm stealing this. This couldn't be original. And I was right. This was actually the name of Oscar Levant's memoirs. You remember Oscar Levant? He was this crazy, drunken, genius piano player who used to be on the Jack Parr show all the time. His memoirs were called Memoirs of an Amnesiac. And I think I may borrow that. But here's one of my short stories, and it'll be in the bookstores any day now.
If there's any bookstores left.
What's that?
If there's any left.
If there's any bookstores. Yeah, the bookstores are going the way of radios. Meeting John Lennon and Yoko and Ono lives in my memory as if it happened yesterday. It did not. It happened a long, long time ago in a galaxy far away, as San Francisco filmmaker George Lucas would inform us years later. Still, the details are indelible. The San Francisco winter of 1972 was typical, cold, gray, and wet, and I loved it. There's something inexplicably sensual about San Francisco when it's cold and wet, and you can walk in the fog and smell the ocean on its breath, and know that you're part of one of the most romantic and desirable cities on earth. San Francisco, a fairy tale enclave of rolling hills, cable cars, and Irish coffee at the Buena Vista. And in those days, rallies in Golden Gate Park to end the war in Vietnam. It was and remains to this day a narcissistic city, unabashedly in love with itself, and I was completely taken in. From the moment I first arrived for a job interview, I felt like I had come home. San Francisco was also fast becoming the nascent home of American post-50s rock and roll, a cultural explosion every bit as influential and revolutionary as the concurrent British invasion, spearheaded by the Beatles. But here, the Grateful Dead, Santana, Jefferson Airplane, Sly and the Family Stone, all of whom appeared at Woodstock this year, that was 69. I'm referring to 1972 here, but very soon after. All the glorious music taking shape in the city by the bay was the focus of everyone's attention. Yes, we reverently called it the city, with a capital C. We were high on ourselves, and everything was really groovy in the city. I was hosting the late morning show on AM radio station KSFO, which immodestly billed itself at the time as the world's greatest radio station. It was a claim that couldn't really be proved one way or the other, but it did have a hell of a lot going for it to make the argument seem plausible. A great station it was, based on its incomparable content, and despite a relatively weak transmission signal. Listen to this. In a city that boasted two 50,000-watt behemoths, KGO and KNBR, KSFO was and remains, well, until today. You have to find the news on your own time. But it still is a low-power station. And despite its weak reach, the station was an amazing amalgam of talented on-air personalities and the broadcast home of every major local sports franchise. The baseball Giants, the football 49ers, and the NBA Warriors. In addition, it had a very hefty payroll for its top-shelf resident disc jockeys, of which I was immodestly one. KSFO was owned by Gene Autry, who was once a popular cowboy movie star, had a very keen business sense. In partnership with Signal Oil, he had formed a company called Golden West Broadcasting. Autry and Company owned the maximum number of radio and TV stations allowed in those days. Each station ran with amazing autonomy as long as each station carved out good ratings. In those days, a company like Golden West could own and operate a total of only 7 radio stations and 4 television stations. That was the FCC limit. That was the law of the land. It was set by the FCC. It was a law that addressed the fearful possibility of a monopoly by any one broadcast company. Preventing monopolies was of concern then. Today, a single broadcast company can own as many as 8 stations in one market. There are 15,333 broadcast stations in the United States, almost twice as many as there were in 1972. And today, giant corporations like, and please hiss as I read this, Clear Channel, Cumulus, Disney, Emmis, Entercom, and Viacom combined own 18% of all the radio stations in the country. So much for concern about monopolies. Welcome to the age of corporations as people. Thanks to the absurd 2010 Supreme Court ruling known as Citizens United, in 1972, the political landscape was nothing like it is today. We would have had rallies to protest such a ridiculous ruling, and we probably would have overturned it, just as we effectively helped to end the war in Vietnam with our tireless dissent. That's not glory de bravura. We really did it. Look it up. I was hosting the 9 to noon slot at the time. My show was a mix of popular middle of the road. Notice I did not use air quotes. I did it with my voice. Because air quotes have to be stopped. I've already talked to the president, our new president, and he's making all these asinine appointments. I'm going to be in charge of penalizing people who use air quotes. Everyone gets a prison sentence. But anyway, I was hosting the 9 to noon slot at the time. My show was a mix of middle-of-the-road music, which leaned heavily on well-established traditional artists. On an average day, Frank Sinatra, Miss Peggy Lee, and various commercial instrumentalists, along with upcoming artists of the day, could be heard emanating from 560 on the AM dial. And in between the music, we had a full complement of commercials, an excellent news department, and, as I stated, a broad schedule of live sports. The on-air staff was a mixed bag of glib and, for the most part, humorous and interesting personalities. We were popular with listeners. People felt that they knew us personally. That's the kind of relationship you had with your favorite radio station. I arrived for my interview at the KSFO studios in the stately Fairmont Hotel on Nob Hill on May 4th, 1969, the very day of the infamous People's Park riot in Berkeley, where activist James Rector lost his life. And while waiting in the lobby, a coughing, disheveled newsman, who I would find out was Aaron Edwards, stumbled through the door, still reeking of tear gas. The excitement and the feeling of portent was palpable. It was history in the making, and it wouldn't be the last episode of unrest that I would witness in the Bay Area. Just 6 months later, Native American Richard Oakes and 89 other tribal members and supporters invaded Alcatraz and its infamous prison complex and occupied it for a year and a half. Anyway, my interview at KSFO went well, and I was asked to join the staff. Jubilation doesn't come close to explaining the feeling. Me, a wise-assed kid from Pittsburgh, would be on the vaunted stage of a great radio station. Molly, my wife, and I wasted no time packing and jumping onto the first available plane to Baghdad by the Bay, the exotic sobriquet coined by renowned newspaper columnist Herb Caen to describe our beloved San Francisco. Back then, the real Baghdad city was city you heard about in romantic stories. Baghdad by the Bay fits San Francisco perfectly. Molly and I arrived in July, just days before 2 American astronauts successfully walked on the surface of the moon. Well, the third, you ever think about Michael Collins, what that was like? You go all the way to the moon, you have to stay in the car. Jesus. We settled in scenic Sausalito, just across the Golden Gate Bridge. The aforementioned Herb Caen always had something laudatory to say about KSFO. And you remember how important Herb was. I mean, everybody read the Caen column. His column extolled our efforts on a regular basis. And so in many listeners' minds, we were the gold standard of the romantic, eclectic San Francisco lifestyle. Entire families listened to KSFO from morning to night. A feat that few stations ever achieved. Our fearless, often inebriated leader was an eccentric morning man named Don Sherwood, an iconoclastic, irreverent native San Franciscan who virtually owned the airwaves. Sherwood was the perennial Peck's bad boy, with ratings that were through the roof. His notorious off-air adventures were the stuff that legends are made of. And a living legend he was. In fits of pique, fueled by alcohol, Sherwood would often disappear from the airwaves and fly to the remote village of Mulegé, Mexico's Baja California, where he would continue his drinking binge that he was currently working on. And while he was gone, as I said, people would listen to his show anyway, just to be caught up on the on-air buzz about Donnie Baby and when he might return. Unbelievably, whether he was there or not, Sherwood's listeners, their loyalty was indestructible. It was my dubious good fortune to follow him from 6 to 9. John Wasserman was the caustic young media critic for Cain's newspaper, The Chronicle. Remember John? Brilliant young guy. The first time John visited me on a Friday morning for a chat about, I don't remember what, we hit it off famously. 2 young guys jawing about the day's trending palaver. Again, glibness was our brand. KSFO abounded in it. Shortly after my show one Friday, I exited the station through the California Street entrance of the Fairmont, and there, standing on the wet sidewalk, puffing a cigarette and holding a styrofoam cup of coffee, was a rain-soaked, very agitated John Wasserman, looking down the incredibly steep descent of California Street as it drops out of sight into the financial district, several blocks below. He had a look of awe on his face. "John, are you okay?" I asked. "They just passed me." He pointed down the steep incline. "Who just passed you?" "John and Yoko." He bleated. "What?" I had heard rumors that Lennon and his wife were in the vicinity. There had been sightings, but nothing confirmed. Now, a real sighting of the brash beetle by one professional celebrity expert, no less. "Which way?" I yelled at him. But I was already racing across Powell Street and beginning the long, slippery descent on the wet concrete sidewalk. A scary, nearly 25% grade, California Street is not the steepest street in the city, but it is still breathtaking. If you're driving downtown, the front of your car virtually disappears as you crest over Powell Street and begin the lunge downward. It can be heart-stopping. But unfortunately, not foot-stopping on a rainy day, wearing slick Nunbush loafers, leather loafers. Under such conditions, it's precarious at best to take the descent at high speed on foot. Nonetheless, I started to sprint and began gliding down California Street like a downhill racer on skis. When I would try to stop, my feet would continue to slide down the wet concrete. Instead of slowing, I picked up speed. Suddenly, maybe 20 yards in front of me, I could see the unmistakable outline of two individuals shrouded in dark clothing. John's silhouette was instantly recognizable. My God, it was really John Lennon and his wife, the mysterious Yoko Ono. Again, I tried to slow my descent, and again my slippery shoes could find no purchase. I was now flying, in danger of becoming airborne. I passed a downward-bound cable car, which I discovered later travels at exactly 9.5 miles an hour. Before I realized it, I was just behind the unsuspecting celebrities. Then, in a rush, I was alongside them. They slowly turned their heads toward me in unison. I was now parallel to them, still going at a good clip. I had given up trying to stop, afraid I'd topple over with the momentum. Now, I was face to face with one of the idols of my life, the great John Lennon. One quarter of the Beatles was eyeing me with a bemused look. I panicked. I would be past them in another instant. My brain raced. I had their undivided attention. I wanted to say something to them, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember what it was. I opened my mouth, and the words that escaped my mouth were unrecognizable. I created a strange, sputtering, gargling sound that sounded like a cry for help from an escaped lunatic. It was something like, and this is as I hurtled by them. I distinctly heard my hero say to his wife, "What the hell was that?" In his cool Liverpool patois, there was the vaguest strain of pity in his voice. Well, I finally came to rest as the level base of Montgomery Street came up to meet me. Arms flapping like a goony bird, I swayed to a stop and stood perfectly still, turning tentatively to look back up California Street. There was no sign of the famous couple. They had somehow fled the scene, no doubt concerned about their safety. They had just been accosted by some sled-footed maniac rocketing past them at high rate of speed, screaming gibberish. What kind of a city is this anyway? They must have thought. Years later, when he was murdered, I thought back to that rainy day, surfing down Nob Hill, trying to get close to the icon, John Lennon. And I thought, my God, this happened to him all the time. People rushing up to him, saying stupid things, trying to express their love for him. He was used to it. And then his assassin, that piece of human excrement whose name I will not print here, got close to him and took his life. Did John have the same bemused look on his face that he had for me when he looked at his killer? Anyhow, that's how I met John Lennon. For him, it was an utterly forgettable experience, I'm sure. For me, I still occasionally am awakened in a cold sweat by the 50-year-old flashback of my garbled, high-velocity screams as I slide down a steep San Francisco street on a cold, wet autumn day in 1972. Thank you. In bookstores soon. Thank you guys very much. I want to thank Steve Cushman. I want to thank Betty Cosmos, right? And also the wonderful permanent member of our staff here, Rachel Lee. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you so much for being here. That was really wonderful. Thank you all for coming. We have a monthly speaker event, so we do these every month. For February, we're going to have Dawn Blue. You can find out more about that on our website. We have an events page, and you can keep up with the other things that are happening at CHRS on our events page. So visit our events page, visit us on a Saturday. Come join, come be here. Thank you so much for coming.
If you like what you saw, here's our donation box. And thank you all. Come back again and see us soon. It was great to have everyone. And I hope you like what we've done with the building to make it comfortable for folks like you.
Great. Radio Day by the Bay in
July 19th is Radio Day by the Bay. And you and I got to talk about a radio play, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Thank you all. Have a pleasant weekend.